Let's pray this morning, shall we? Gracious God, we give this day, this message, our lives, our meditation into your hands. Come, Holy Spirit, enlighten and enliven us. Renew within us wisdom, faith, and hope. Amen. Well, Pastor Kathleen came up with this. I said, hey, why don't you do the Advent series and give me some direction on what we're going to preach about this Advent season. So she came back and she said, I'm thinking about, where's Jesus? And I have to tell you, I said, where's Waldo? We're all going to get a map and have to look for Jesus. And she goes, well, and we started talking about this, and she put this together, and I said, okay, when do you want me to preach? And so she today is officiating communion at another church in our district for us this morning, so she'll be with us a little bit later. But we've been asked to do that on the first Sunday of the month. But I started looking at this. And she said, well, the first week I want you to talk about, where is God, where's Jesus in the decorations? And primarily use the symbol of the Christmas tree. So I went, oh, okay. So then I started investigating the history of the symbol of the Christmas tree. And I almost called her and said, I'm not doing it, man. Because this has been a subject of controversy in the church. The Christmas tree there's a lot of different places that have different theories, but it primarily came in the Middle Ages between the Scandinavians and the Germans. And it was believed that there was a ritual custom that people would bring in just one branch and hang it above their door as a means to worship a foreign god. And so bringing greenery into the church became at times a very controversial item. And really, we don't know where the practice really kind of started. We just know that at one point it exploded. And there's a couple different ways in which the Christmas tree has come to be placed in our living rooms. And really, if our parents decided to do this when we were kind of, 12 or 14 years old, let's bring a live tree in and just put it in the living room, we might question. But the fact that we were all probably infants when this tradition started in our homes, we never questioned. But it is kind of an odd thing if you think about it. But what we found is a couple things. I found a story of one of the early saints of the church in 722, Saint Boniface. He learned about these customs in which people would bring in this branch of this balm in the Solace period, which was right around December 25th, 24th, and hang it in their homes. And he preached vehemently against this. This was one way that the Christian community set itself against the world. We're not here to put anything in our house that worships a foreign god. Then the story comes out that he moved to a town in his preaching days, and he came into this particular town. I don't know which town it is, but there he came into contact with some locals. The term pagans is used for them. And he learned that next day, outside an oak tree, just outside his the place where he was staying, that there was a religious group that was going to practice sacrifice underneath that tree to the god of fertility or something like this. And this infuriated Boniface to think that there were people who would still kill innocent people in the form of sacrifice. So that evening he went out and he bought an axe and he started hacking away at the bottom of this tree. And as luck or unluck would have it, a storm would blow through that would be so severe he wouldn't have a chance to finish his work. He ran indoors to kind of save his own life, and when he came back next morning, the tree had split into four. It was sitting in four different large pieces in the ground. And a year later, when he came back out of the center of that grew an evergreen. And so he believes that this is kind of a symbol, or might then have softened a little bit in his theory on bringing trees into the house. But it's also rumored that Martin Luther might have been the first preacher to bring an evergreen into his house. Again, the theory here is that he was walking in the forest and looking up through the trees and seeing the starlights, and he wanted to replicate that in his house, so we brought a tree in. I think he is credited to be the first person to put lights or candles on a tree, to replicate what he saw and to celebrate God's nature. So I was thinking about this, going, what in God's green earth was Kathleen thinking when she gave me this idea? But the more I thought about this, I go back into the scriptures and I see several scriptures about trees and what they mean. And one of those is in Genesis 1:12. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to their owns, and trees bearing fruit in which is their seed, each according to their kind. And God saw that it was good. How are we to call what God created unholy? Or could it really be just what we make it? And I really thought, man, that might just be summarizing maybe what Pastor Kathleen was thinking in this whole thing. The traditions that we form, the customs that we have, that we associate with a specific event or season or memory, are they for God's glorification or for something else? We all have customs and traditions, right? We all form them. When you hear the first 3 or 4 notes of a song and it takes you back to a specific point, right? Maybe it's the song you dance to with your spouse at your wedding. You smell a certain smell. Sugar cookies always remind me of Valentine's Day and my wife's grandmother, right? Certain types of music remind me of different people in my lives who maybe introduced me to that genre or that person. Certain scents, right? I walk through a store and smell fresh cut evergreens and I think of Christmas, because we always had a fresh cut tree in the house. I smell the smell of fresh cut grass, and I'm right back there in the summer, you know, sitting on a lawn waiting for the fireworks to go off. That we all do associations in our minds and things in our lives that bring about a memory and a thought. And I guess it's our hope this Advent season to look at some of our customs in the Christmas season and the Advent season and reorient ourselves in a way that we might think about in new ways, or maybe in very old ways, the message of the gospel. That God came to live amongst us. So as I continued to search for scriptures around trees and bushes and branches, we came to the reading from Jeremiah. Now, up to this point, Jeremiah is preaching quite a bit of doom and gloom. But he says, in those days and at that time, I will raise up a righteous branch from David's line, who will do what is just and right in the land. In those days, Judah will be saved and Jerusalem will live safely. Trees are commonly understood or used as metaphors in Scripture for families, like Jesse's branch from Jesse's tree, of a people. Israel at times is described by the prophets as a new tree that grows among living streams that flow right through the temple area. It's used in dreams for things, but it's also used to indicate a people. And the more I thought about the tree symbolism in our scripture, isn't it interesting that the only specific plants listed in the creation story are 2 trees, the tree of life and the tree of good and evil, or tree of knowledge of good and evil. Isn't it interesting at the end that the only piece of nature mentioned in Revelations in the new city is the tree of life coming back? And isn't it interesting in between those that the greatest message that we have as a Christian community is to speak about our Savior who died on a tree? So who am I to stand up here and say putting a Christmas tree in a house is unrighteous or unholy? I think only we would make it unrighteous and unholy if we decided it was time to worship the tree. So I'm going to challenge us this year. Are there ways within our faith tradition that we can go back and look and say, why do we do this? And what relationship does it have to Jesus Christ and to his willingness to be incarnated, made in human form, and to live amongst us? To leave the greatest kingdom we would ever know, and I hope we all know one day. To live amongst this imperfect community of people. And not just live amongst them, but do everything that they might live and live eternally. But that's the good news we preach, right? God came in human form to live amongst us, to be amongst us, to be one of us. So that in our suffering, he knows our suffering, because he suffered. In our times of injustice, he has experienced injustice and understands it. That the traditions that we have might at times seem a bit secular, but there are ways for us to teach within our own family, within our own tree, within our own community, what it means to look at this in a faith-based way. And then ironically this morning, as I was up early scrolling through Facebook, I know there's other things I could be doing. Interestingly enough, a meme came up that said, your family's just like a tree. Branches all grow and go in a different direction, but they all have a common root. And I would add, they're all little nuts. But that's just my family. I'm sure yours is different. And I know my dad's going to call me today and say, hey, I listened to your sermon today. But the reality is, friends, that the tree is a symbol of a family, of life, of a people who know Christ. And sometimes we grow in different directions. Sometimes we point in different ways, right? Sometimes we emphasize different things, one or another. It doesn't make it wrong, and it doesn't make any one part detached from the other if we grow together. And then it left me to think about Jesus' speech as he sits at the Last Supper table in the 15th chapter of the Gospel of John. I am the vine, you are the branches. That we are one if we grow together as one. It's not about how we see things differently. It's who we were created in commonly. It's the one who created us, who challenges us, who nurtures us, in who our faith is rooted, and in whom we trust for life. So I hope this Christmas season, I hope as you move along in the busyness of all of the other traditions, that you don't lose sight, and I don't lose sight of what's truly important. That's the blessing, the gift of a baby in a manger, of a man who would teach and heal, guide and love, who would give all for himself that we might know we're not alone. And this isn't the end. And just as the baby escapes and we're left with an empty manger in the beginning of the story, we're left with the hope of an empty tomb at the end of the story. So I think Pastor Kathleen's onto something here. I got to give her a little more credit than I initially did when I was sitting at my computer on Thursday going, what was she thinking and where is she? Right now, she was in a training session. So friends, what do you make of this season? It's a time of preparing for family. It's a time of sharing of love, gift giving, fellowship, table meals, selflessness, and celebration are all appropriate when put and cast in the light of the God who loves us more than we could ever possibly know. So as we start this season together, we start it with hope. Hope that the life that God breathes into us, and the new life that he breathes into us, might feed his world, that we might be messengers, harbingers of hope in future days. Amen?
Amen.
I could tell you a lot more stories, but I think That's pretty much it. So we're going to call the praise band forward this morning as they lead us in a time of worship and praise for the one who we love, because he loved us first.